Hi, I'm Morgan, and today I'm going to be talking about what I read in the month of November. November was actually a super good reading month for me. I got quite a lot read, both my own personal books that I wanted to read and some books for university. Getting both done is always a feat. The first book I read in November was The Penelope Ad by Margaret Atwood. I really liked this. I'm slowly but surely becoming a classics nerd, which I'm not entirely sure if that's a good or bad thing yet. But it doesn't matter. I gave this 4 stars. This is a retelling of the story of Penelope, who is married to Odysseus, and it follows her while the Odyssey is going on. I loved the inclusion of the maids as a traditional Greek chorus, presenting little interludes between the chapters and giving us a voice that isn't Penelope's. In case you hadn't inferred it from like every other video on my channel, I love talking about women in classics. So what I really liked about this is that Atwood is giving Penelope some kind of control over her narrative, showing that she isn't just a passive, patient wife, which we do get in a lot of different media about classics. Although, to be honest, I haven't actually read the Odyssey, so I don't know what the traditional portrayal of Penelope is, but it's just interesting compared to like overall portrayals of women of the time. I didn't give this 5 stars, even though I kind of thought I would have, because it just kind of didn't reach that height for me. I don't really know why, I can't really put my finger on it, it just didn't. And I was kind of disappointed in the portrayal of Helen. I don't know, I prefer it when Helen is given some sort of sympathy and some level of understanding about the choices that she made, instead of just portraying her as vain and selfish. So Helen did kind of put me off. But apart from that, I really enjoyed it because Margaret Atwood writes so well. And I would definitely recommend this even if you're not super into classics, because it is very short. And it's a really interesting kind of weaving of prose and verse, and also kind of classic narratives with a modern way of writing and speaking about things. The next book I read was The French Lieutenant's Woman by John Fowles. I gave this 3 stars. It was a book I had to read for my Neo-Victorian literature class, and I actually did like this one. I did finish it. And it didn't make me want to pull my hair out, so that's always a positive. The plot itself was very traditional, very classic. An engaged gentleman meets a fallen woman, becomes intrigued by her, and falls in love. And I do enjoy a Victorian narrative, so the basics of the story was enough to intrigue me and for me to tolerate anything that I maybe didn't particularly like. Too many L's for my accent. I liked Sarah, not necessarily as a person, but definitely as a character. Although I am sympathetic to her, even though I might not necessarily like her as a person, because, you know, she did what she did. She said, fuck that noise, she got out of there, she pursued the independence that she always wanted. When I talk about the portrayal of women in texts, I just kind of feel like that meme from, I think it's from Arrested Development, and it's the woman holding the cupcake and she just says, good for her, and that's how I feel. I think studying it as a text helped me enjoy it more, because I think you do need a working knowledge of the context and the academia behind the text and the kind of genre that it's written in to actually enjoy it fully. Which in my opinion is very annoying, hence why it is only 3 stars. But it was one of the better texts that I read for this class, so there's that. The next book I read was also from my Neo-Victorian class, and it was The Air Affair by Jasper Fforde. Is it Ford or Fjord? It's got the double F, so I'm not entirely sure. I also gave this one 3 stars for different reasons. It is batshit crazy. I don't know, that's all I have to say. I finished it and I was like, what did I just read? So this is about a woman called Thursday Next, who is a literary detective in a world where literature is actually a super big part of people's lives and not a weird, obscure, pretentious thing that you get a degree in and then don't use. And Thursday gets involved in trying to track down this evil guy who she can identify because she was taught by him when she was in university. That's like the overarching plot. There's so much more going on, but that's kind of what links everything together. It touches on a whole bunch of different genres, including science fiction and neo-Victorian. So many different genres. I'm still not entirely sure what I feel about it, and it's been quite a while since I read it. Like, I didn't hate it, and it wasn't badly written, but I don't think it's my kind of book, if that makes sense. Like, there's a whole series, and I am not gonna go and read the rest of them, but it wasn't a bad book, like, it was fine. I just personally didn't enjoy it that much. I thought it was a little much. And I know that a lot of it is like literary in-jokes and there's like 4 layers of meaning behind things. But personally, I don't always find that interesting in a book. And this was one of the times that I didn't. So it's not bad, but I'm never going to read it again. So speaking of batshit crazy, the next book I read was The Girl Who Fell Out of the Sky by Victoria Forrester. I gave this 3 stars. It is the 3rd and hopefully last book in a series which would probably be called middle grade. I don't know what I'd call it here, like primary, like late primary school. I don't know, everything's American. This follows a girl called Piper McLeod, there she is, and her motley crew of super-powered teenager preteen friends who do typical superhero world-saving stuff. In this book, they are fighting off some kind of big evil beetle things caused by the bad guy from the last book, and Piper loses her ability to fly. The further away I get from the first book, the less I feel like I'm reading the same series. It is insane. It kind of feels like Victoria Forrester didn't really know where she was going with this, and the fact that they were published so far apart kind of supports that. And I mean, arguably that could be because she didn't have the backing of a publisher, which is fair enough, that those things happen, but the way it reads doesn't read like she had a fully formed plan and it just got kind of halted. It reads like they said, hey, you want to write another book? And she said, sure, and just kind of made some stuff up. The character of Max, who was a bad guy in the last book, felt completely redundant in this book. There was no reason for him to be there. It was so anticlimactic. The plot itself felt kind of meandering, going from Piper's arc of trying to value herself for more than just her ability to fly, to the weird mountain secret society people being just creepy as all hell, as usual, to Max literally freeing ancient cryptid beetles from inside the earth. I feel like we should have focused on that a lot more. And also covering the judgment that Piper and the other kids face from Piper's weird small town. It's like 300 pages! Oh. So much was happening in such a short book. And it's not the length that was the problem. Like I said, this book is kind of middle grade-ish, so the length is to be expected. Even the kind of slightly 2D elements of the characters' personalities could also be accepted, you know, wanting kids to be able to understand and relate to them, although I still do think a lot of them were way too flat. But the plot was just way too much for the space. Nothing was given enough time or weight to properly develop. And the thing is, kids can understand things that are allowed to properly develop. It's not like you have to simplify it for children, like, completely. children are capable of understanding complex things as long as you don't say it in a complex way, if that makes sense. I just think that we should give children more credit, and I don't think this book gave children a lot of credit and kind of spoon-fed things instead of actually letting them develop and letting kids engage with their critical thinking skills. I think I'm getting a little bit too heated about this, but it's just how it is. But I still love these characters. They bring back such a nostalgia for me. I read the first book when I was like 9 or something. I think it came out in 2008, so I would have been 9. But to me, it just doesn't feel like Victoria Forrester was writing about the same characters and the same plot and the same world that she wrote about in The Girl Who Could Fly. I was just kind of disappointed. Like, it wasn't terrible, but could have been so much better. The next book I read was I Would Leave Me If I Could by Halsey. This is a poetry collection released by the singer Halsey. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. Not a surprise. Before I go on, I would just like to add that Halsey was my top artist in my Spotify Wrapped, and also 4 of my top favourite songs. So yeah, it's not a surprise that I enjoyed this. There was really no way I wasn't gonna like it, but it just kind of solidified to me how much I love her writing and her metaphors and the kind of images that she puts into her songs and her poetry. I also really enjoyed recognising bits of her discography. Some poems clearly being where the song started. There's a little snippet of The Devil in Me, which is where it originally started, just as this little poem, and then she made it into a whole song. And there's also a lot of themes and phrases that just call back to different songs that she's written, and they're clearly things that all link in her mind. I just really enjoyed it, and it's very pretty. I got the hardcover because it just came out, and it's just beautiful. Oh. Because Halsey also does art, so it's art. It's her art, should I say. It's not just art. It is art, but it's her art. Art is beginning to sound very funny. But yeah, I enjoyed it, and I'm gonna probably reread it and tab it and stuff, because I don't know if I can bring myself to highlight a book like this. My copy of Ariel, it took me so long to start highlighting it, because it's the same, it's like a lovely hardback poetry collection. I'm just happy. The next book I read was Fleur by Darshana Suresh. I think that's how you pronounce it. Don't trust me. I gave this 3 stars. It's some more poetry. A little chap book that I bought off of Etsy. I think I overly pronounced that there, but there were too many layers. All of the poems in this chapbook are about the same person, the same relationship, and Darshana refers to this person as Fleur. I was actually looking for a specific poem. It's about finally admitting that you have feelings for another woman and it being okay when you say it out loud. There's a phrase in it, digging up Atlantis, and the whole quote around that, the whole like section around that is what I was looking for, because I really love it. I wrote in my notes, side note, still slaps, because I read that poem like years ago, and then I finally got around to actually getting the chapbook. But yeah, that's the poem that I really wanted to find, and I still love it. And there's quite a few other quality poems in there too. Overall, it is a really, really short collection. And in my opinion, the quality of the poems really does vary from poem to poem. But Darshana Suresh has really lovely writing and some really A+ imagery. So I'm definitely looking forward to buying her other collections. I believe I have 1 on my list. I don't know if she has any others, but I know there's at least 1. So I will be reading that. The next book I read was Stiletto by Daniel O'Malley, and oh my goodness, it really does reflect the light. It's very metallic. Just do this so that my ring light doesn't set everything alight. So I gave this 3 stars. This is the sequel to The Rook, which I read last year? The year before? I don't remember. This series, it is a series. I thought it was a duology at first, but there is another book coming out. It focuses on a secret government agency in the UK called the Check Key. I think it's the Check Key, that's how I pronounce it in my head. I'll put the word somewhere. And this agency deals with supernatural threats. Now, I wasn't sure about this one because The Rook left me very conflicted. I liked it, but I also didn't, which is a weird feeling. It was a kind of weird read. I love the idea behind it, and I really liked the kind of lore that O'Malley included, and I did really want to like Mythony, I think that's how you pronounce it. There's a whole explanation in the book where it's Tiffany with an M, so Mythony. But O'Malley's writing, I think, just didn't really endear me to her. So I picked this one up because I did want to see how the diplomatic situation resolved itself after the end of the last book. This both lived up to my expectations and also didn't. Like I said, weird read. I enjoyed the POV characters in this a lot more than I enjoyed O'Malley writing Mythony in the last book. Both of the women POV characters we got here were interesting. I liked that we got a soldier and a scientist in contrast to Mythony's kind of civil servant politician type person. I also liked that we got to see more of the Check Key and how it worked and kind of things that went on outside of the Check Key. But there were a couple of things that let it down. And I think that both of these things were because the length got away from O'Malley a little bit. It kind of felt like he kept repeating himself and doubling back on things, which takes you out of the experience. It's never fun. Firstly, it was the characterization. Both Felicity and Odette, who are the two point of view characters, they grew as people, but multiple times it felt like the way they were acting would have been more appropriate to who they were a few chapters ago. I'm going to give an example, but it is a spoiler, just a warning. After the antagonists attack London and other cities in the UK with the weird fog, Felicity realises while they're in the fog that Odette's conversation with Simon was 100% real and not put on for her benefit, because there's no way they could know that she would still be able to be like awake and conscious and aware and able to hear them. And she decides to trust Odette. And then she's still suspicious of Odette for several chapters afterwards. It made no sense. You said that the girl just proved herself to you, but you're still suspicious. It just kind of felt like he was doubling back, or he was reverting to the way he'd characterised Felicity a few chapters ago. The second thing I had a problem with was the plot. Now, don't get me wrong, it was really interesting. The plot itself I thought was pretty cool. I found the antagonists really intriguing, and I was actually interested in the kind of weird political implications of everything. But for the extent that it was built up, the climax, final confrontation, final battle, whatever you want to call it, was extremely anticlimactic. There was just so much potential and it completely let me down. Especially since I was enjoying this a lot more than I was enjoying The Rook. I just felt that there should have been more build-up than there was. A lot of the plot and the events that happened felt like they were all happening on the same line. Usually the plot will build up to the climax at the end, and whatever it is will happen near the end, and then it goes back down as, you know, an epilogue where it's like everyone's fine or whatever. But for me, it kind of felt like it just kind of went up at the start and then kept going along. That's not a satisfying ending. And that's what let me down the most. I am still going to read the next one because I did enjoy this. I enjoyed it more than The Rook. And I am hopeful that O'Malley will fix some of these things and, you know, hopefully learn from his own mistakes. I don't actually know if he's ever written anything else. I don't think he has. Also, he's Australian. He's Australian and he went to university in America. That explains some things. It really does. The next book is very heavy. And that book is Nosferatu by Joe Hill. I'm just gonna sit with it because it's actually very cold on my face and very heavy, so this helps support it. I gave this 5 stars, and in my notes I wrote, oh shit, here we go. So this is a horror, I think, technically. And Joe Hill is the son of Stephen King. I feel like I have to add that for some context. But obviously he changed his name to try and get away from the fact that his dad is Stephen King. So, sorry Joe. So, when she's 15, Victoria, who goes by Vic, is kidnapped by a man called Charlie Manx. This is him. He is a kind of energy vampire that has the same access to the liminal world of ideas and imagination that Vic herself has access to. Vic is instrumental in stopping him from kidnapping more children, so years later he retaliates by kidnapping her son. Honestly, I loved this. I really did. Was it perfect? No. Was it groundbreaking? No. Was it extremely fun? Yes. I really liked Vic as a character. She was flawed and traumatised and had a myriad of issues, but that never makes her a bad person. In, you know, our eyes. She thinks that she's a bad person herself, but she's portrayed as just this traumatised, flawed woman. And it's clear that the issues she has don't override the love she has for Lou and their son Wayne. Plot-wise, I have no idea if this is an original idea. No clue. Because I don't know that much about traditional horror. However, it was fucking cool. I thought it was so cool. I thought it was such a good idea and I really enjoyed it. And I'm probably going to say that about 10 times, that I just enjoyed it. There's no other words for it. It was nice to read a book that I didn't feel like I had to try. I didn't feel like I had to try and use my brain. I mean, I did have to use my brain to figure out what was going on, obviously, but it was just nice. It was nice to just, I don't really know how to describe it. Just making Christmas creepy, yes. Semi-sentient vehicles as a vessel for weird magic, sign me up. In general, I think this is too heavy. It's waving back and forth. I think I just like how Joe Hill writes. I really enjoyed one of his other books, The Fireman, that I read 2 years ago, maybe? Possibly. I'd have to check my Goodreads. But I did really enjoy that. And I think people are always going to compare him to Stephen King. Like I said, I think he changed his name on purpose, but I'm sorry, Joe. Everybody knows. At the same time, I think kind of reducing him just to Stephen King's son is kind of cheating. Yeah, I do think there is an echo of King's writing in Hill's novels. I mean, I think I've also read his short story collection, Strange Weather. I think that's his anyway. But he is a good writer in and of himself. And, you know, thankfully he lacks a lot of the weird, semi-offensive shit that we got from 80s cocaine-addled Stephen King. So, you know, that's always a positive. Like I said earlier, it's not perfect. I think that the character of Maggie was underutilised and she deserved a lot more. She went out of her way to help Vic. She didn't have to. She didn't have to care about Manx kidnapping children, but she did anyway. And also, my personal opinion, I think Vic deserved a better ending. While I would have preferred that she... Oh, spoilers. I was about to go straight into that there. This is going to have spoilers. Until I get rid of the book, there's going to be spoilers. I would have preferred that Vic didn't die, but I do understand why Hill chose for that to happen. However, I do think she deserved more than just dying off screen. Arguably, the way the chapter ends, we know that's going to happen. But we also get told later on that she lives to go to the hospital. Like, she lives and dies in the hospital, and she talks to Lou, and I think she talks to Wayne as well. She deserved for us to see that happiness. Like, I know we got to see her save her son and all that, but I don't know, I just think that after this big story that she's instrumental in, she deserved a better ending. However, like I said, I understand why she died. I just think we should have seen more of that. And I did actually like the ending. Like the very end, which is kind of a prologue. All of the kids coming back from Christmas Land. Lou smashing all the ornaments and bringing the kids' souls back. Ooh, I literally started crying. Like, the rest of the book, I was fine. I was emotional. I was like, oh my god, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen. But I didn't cry. There was no tears until Lou started smashing those ornaments and said that he wanted his son back. Like, Manx took this and I am taking him back. And then all the kids walking out of the forest. Whew! That got me. That really got me, I will admit. Okay, second to last book. Let's go. Speed round. Although it's not going to be a speed round because it's me we're talking about here. But speed round. The next book I read was The Go-Between by L.P. Hartley. This is another book that I read for my Neo-Victorian class and I gave it 3 stars. Surprise, surprise. This is about a 12-year-old boy who is, funnily enough, a go-between for the rich sister of his friend, or the sister of his rich friend? I don't know. Both the sister and the friend are rich. They're siblings. But he's a go-between for the sister and her lover, who is not of the same social class, in the summer of 1900 while he's staying with his friend at their stately home. I don't have a lot of opinions on this, which often happens with university books, but I did enjoy the writing. I thought it was very readable, and the plot was interesting. The fact that it chose to focus on this young boy getting a glimpse of a world that is completely new to him, both in terms of kind of sexual experience and his interpretation of the class system. This wasn't my favourite of the semester, but I did enjoy it and it was a solid way to finish. Okay, we're here. Last book I read, World After by Susan E. I think it's E. I don't know. My brain. I gave this 4 stars. I read it all in one day. God, I miss YA supernatural romances. All the things I read when I was like 14, I miss them. There is really nothing, there's nothing they can compare to. Nothing. This is the sequel to Angel Fall, which is about a 17-year-old girl who is looking for her sister who has been taken by angels. Yes, angels. After said angels came to Earth and started an apocalypse. Whew. There really is nothing like it. In World After, she is dealing with the consequences of the first book, of the things that the angels have done to her sister and how people are scared of her family because they're all weird. Her mum, I believe, is schizophrenic and has no medication because it's the apocalypse. And Penryn kind of, people think she comes back from the dead, she doesn't, but that's what people think. So her whole family is just weird. Naturally, in this book, she ends up looking for her sister again, ends up in the heart of the Angels operation again, finds Raph and his wings again. Was it basically just the same skeleton of a plot changed up so that it fits with the first book? Yes. Did I care when I was reading it? No. To be honest, I didn't even really notice until I sat down to write the notes for this. And then it occurred to me that I was basically reading the same book. Honestly, it's not groundbreaking. It's not something new, especially if you were there for the surge of supernatural romances in the early 2000s. But it is good, and that is what matters. I really like Penryn, the protagonist. I think she's a really good teen protagonist. She's got that kind of typical sassy and outspoken personality of a YA heroine, but she is also still just a teenager trying to protect her family, and that vulnerability does come through. Also, her mother's illness actually gives us a reason for Penryn being as independent as she is, because she has essentially been her mother's carer for years before the apocalypse. So it makes her less Mary Sue-ish. Not that I care if a YA heroine is a Mary Sue, and I really don't like the term Mary Sue, but it's the only term we have. So that's what we're going with. And I don't really have a lot to say about Raph, who is the angel love interest. Just that I do actually like him, and I like the chemistry between Raph and Penryn. And it's always nice for the immortal love interest not to immediately want to bone the teenage girl. So that's definitely a positive of this book. And those are the books that I read in November. So many books. So many opinions. This video is running at almost an hour. It's 52 minutes. Why do I do this to myself? Fully. What is wrong with me? Anyway, if you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching, especially because this is probably going to be super long. I appreciate each and every one of you. I'd love if you could like, comment, subscribe. You can come chat to me in the comments down below or on my social medias, which will all be linked in the description as always. I'm going to wrap this up quickly because it's going to be a hell of a lot to edit. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye!